The rain fell like it meant to wash the city clean, cold and relentless, blurring streetlights into trembling halos and soaking everything it touched. People hurried past with their heads down, umbrellas tilted like shields, each one desperate to reach somewhere warm. In the middle of that downpour, a single father stood frozen on the sidewalk, his jacket already heavy with water, staring at an old man who was struggling to take even one more step. The man's cane slipped on the wet pavement, his body trembling, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause, because this was the kind of moment that decided who we really are. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small, selfless acts to change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist because people like you believe goodness still matters. The single father's name was Daniel, though most people never noticed him enough to learn it. He was the kind of man society looked through rather than at. Early 30s, tired eyes, shoulders slightly hunched as if life itself weighed on them. He worked long shifts at a mid-sized corporate building as a maintenance supervisor, a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table, but never enough to ease the constant knot of worry in his chest. Every morning before work, he woke his 6-year-old daughter Lily, braided her hair with clumsy fingers, packed her lunch, and dropped her at a neighbor's apartment before heading out into the world. Her mother had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, and since then, Daniel's life had become a careful balancing act of grief, responsibility, and quiet endurance. That evening, the rain caught him off guard. His bus had dropped him 2 blocks from home, and by the time he noticed the clouds, it was already pouring. He thought of Lily waiting, probably doing homework at the kitchen table, and instinct urged him to hurry. But then he saw the old man. Bent almost double, coat too thin for the weather, shoes soaked through, the man was trying to cross the street as cars splashed past, indifferent and impatient. No one slowed. No one stopped. Daniel hesitated, knowing every minute mattered, knowing he was already late, knowing the world rarely rewarded those who paused. Still, something deeper than logic anchored his feet to the pavement. He stepped into the rain, took the old man's arm, and guided him slowly to the shelter of a nearby awning. Water streamed down Daniel's face, mixing with the rain so that even he couldn't tell how cold he'd become. The old man's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Daniel gave him his own jacket, ignoring the sting of the cold against his skin, and waited until the man's breathing steadied. He walked him the rest of the way to a nearby bus stop, making sure he was seated safely before finally leaving. The entire time, Daniel said nothing dramatic, expected nothing in return. He simply did what felt right, then disappeared back into the rain. By the time Daniel reached home, he was drenched and exhausted. Lily ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs, and he smiled despite the fatigue that clung to him like the wet fabric of his clothes. That night, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in his mind. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He only wondered if he'd done enough, if the old man was warm now, safe now. Then sleep finally claimed him, heavy and dreamless. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Daniel rushed through his routine, his thoughts already consumed by work. The company he worked for had recently changed management, and rumors of budget cuts and layoffs whispered through the hallways like ghosts. Daniel's position, once secure, suddenly felt fragile. He had been late twice that month due to Lily getting sick, and his supervisor had made it clear that excuses were no longer tolerated. As he walked into the building, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, he felt the familiar anxiety tighten in his chest. One mistake, one misstep, and everything he'd built for his daughter could vanish. The day unfolded with relentless pressure. A minor maintenance issue on one of the executive floors escalated into a major complaint. Daniel did everything he could to fix it, skipping lunch, running between floors, hands shaking from stress. Still, by late afternoon, he was called into an office and informed that upper management was displeased. His performance, they said, was being reviewed. The word review echoed ominously in his mind, heavy with unspoken consequences. He left the office feeling smaller than ever, the walls of the building seeming to close in around him. As fate would have it, the very next morning, Daniel was summoned again, this time to a meeting that felt final. He barely slept the night before, imagining Lily's face if he told her they might have to move, or worse. Walking through the lobby, he noticed a familiar figure standing near the reception desk, an elderly man in a clean coat, posture straighter than before, eyes alert and observant. Daniel slowed, uncertain, until recognition struck like lightning. It was the man from the rain. The old man noticed Daniel too, and something unreadable passed through his expression. Daniel offered a polite nod, assuming nothing more would come of it. He had no idea that the man he'd helped was one of the company's largest external consultants, a former executive who now advised on internal restructuring and personnel decisions. The man had come that day specifically to observe the building, its operations, and the people who kept it running. And he remembered Daniel clearly, not just his face, but the quiet dignity of his kindness in the rain. As Daniel sat through the meeting, listening to carefully worded criticisms of his punctuality and efficiency, the door opened. The old man entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. He listened as management spoke, then calmly requested to hear more about Daniel's role. When Daniel was asked to explain his responsibilities, his voice trembled, but he spoke honestly, describing his workload, his commitment, and the challenges he faced as a single parent. He did not beg. He did not dramatize. He simply told the truth. What happened next felt unreal to Daniel. The old man spoke about character, about integrity, about the unseen moments that reveal who a person truly is. He described, without embellishment, a rainy night when a stranger chose compassion over convenience. He emphasized that companies often measure success in numbers, but forget that it is people who sustain them. The room fell silent. Decisions that had seemed inevitable moments before suddenly shifted. By the end of the meeting, Daniel was informed that not only was his job secure, but his role would be restructured to better support his responsibilities, with more stable hours and added support. The weight that lifted from his chest was so sudden, so overwhelming, that he had to sit down. For the first time in years, he felt something close to relief. That evening, Daniel walked home under a clear sky, the city glowing softly around him. He picked Lily up, spun her around in the air, and laughed, a sound that surprised even him. Over dinner, he felt lighter, more present, as if a fog had finally lifted. He didn't tell her every detail, but he told her that being kind mattered, even when it was hard, even when no one was watching. Lily listened with wide eyes, absorbing the lesson in the simple way children do, as truth rather than advice. In the days that followed, Daniel's life didn't become perfect. Bills still came. Mornings were still rushed. Grief still surfaced in quiet moments. But something fundamental had changed. He carried with him the understanding that his small act in the rain had rippled outward in ways he could never have predicted. Kindness, he realized, was not a transaction. It was an investment in humanity itself. As this story comes closer to its end, take a moment to reflect on how a single decision, to stop, to help, to care, can alter the course of multiple lives. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power you hold in everyday moments, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel to keep stories like this alive. Before we reach the final moments, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness came back to you in an unexpected way? Your story might inspire someone else who feels invisible right now. The rain that once soaked Daniel to the bone became a quiet memory, but its impact endured. Somewhere in the city, an old man walked a little steadier, reminded that goodness still existed. Somewhere in a small apartment, a little girl slept peacefully, unaware that her future had been safeguarded by a simple act of compassion. And somewhere in the vast, hurried world, the idea took root once more that no kindness is ever wasted, even when it feels small, even when it goes unseen.